as it develops. Joining us now, we've been doing these things, folks, where our legislators come on and they give their impression of the session. And we have Senator Blake Johnson joins us via phone. He represents the good folks of District 20. Welcome back to the program, sir.
How are you, Paul? Good to be back.
Yes, sir. I'm glad that you could join us. And first question, I'd love to know, the status of your district and the flooding. Did how much of your district was affected by this terrible flooding?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. 3 counties, Randolph, which I represent, Pocahontas and Randolph County, and Lawrence County, a lot of Lawrence County, and Pocahontas, East Pocahontas, and Western Clay County. Success was pretty devastated in the flooding, and I've got to give a shout out to those local officials, the fire departments, the police department, city and county, and the county judges, and everyone worked together and has been super in this operation, and we got real good response from the governor, and he sent those state assets in, which was a real big help to those local officials and those highway closures where they could assist in the traffic, where the National Guard and the state police and the highway police, the game and fish and the highway department. Those guys worked tirelessly during this process. Those game and fish officers and helped with the county guys and would go out in boats and rescue and deliver food and help keep a lot of people in my district safe. So I just want to say a word of appreciation to all those folks.
What's the damage up to? I'm starting to hear some numbers, of what all this is going to cost. I guess not including the hit to the economy with the rice crop being devastated.
Yeah, there's rice and corn were affected, and a lot of that won't be known until the floodwaters completely recede and see what makes it. There's a lot of silt when the levees break like that go, and fast running water on the Current River side causes a lot of damage that, even if the crops like rice that could survive, whenever they get buried under 6 to 12 inches of silt, they just won't make it through that. Yeah. And
somebody told me, and you're a farmer, so you know what you're talking about here, obviously. So I heard somebody tell me today that, as of right now, if we don't get any more rain, there might be a little hope here or there. But if we were to get some more rain on top of this, then, there's just no way that they would, be able to recover or replant or anything like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's some time with rice. You got a short window. You really want to have that in by the middle of May. And corn, it's getting to the end of where you can plant that corn. If it was sprayed with atrazine, prior to this flood, you're limited on options on what you can plant if it's been sprayed with atrazine. So it's kind of critical, the timing. I don't know, the corn that went under is probably the most timely deal that matter in farming. Now the dollar amounts, that's been estimated at $65 million, and like I said, you can't estimate or put a pencil to that until everything goes down and see what it.
We're talking with Senator Blake Johnson from District 20. Obviously, his district affected by this flooding. And I know I've seen on Twitter there's been some relief efforts of places people can donate. Do you know of any anywhere that you could direct the listeners to go and donate?
The Red Cross, I think, is having all the Ministerial Alliance in Pocahontas. They've been real helpful throughout the process. The Pocahontas Ministerial Alliance and the Red Cross has been doing those local drives but any of those organizations who have been in the process is I think the Red Cross is probably the main one.
Okay. Okay. Well, I certainly want to tweet all those out, and want to encourage everybody to help. I know people have been giving. trying to help Pocahontas, one of the worst affected areas. Just unbelievable that we would have this amount of flooding. They called one a couple of years ago the 100-year flood, but they had nothing on this. I mean, this is serious stuff here.
I think I'm somewhere pushing 500 years at my 46th year in actual reality, because I think I've lived through about 3 100-year floods and an ice storm. So.
Yeah, it's a 100-year ice storm. It's a 100-year flood. Yeah. So I don't know why we say that. Do we say that? We say that to make ourselves feel better, so it'll never happen again. I guess it won't ever happen again in my lifetime. I only have to do this once.
We're going to try to do everything we can do to mitigate and try to do some common sense things to help with relief, so the east side of Pocahontas don't flood again. I hope we can get a relief spillway and a floodway through the east side over there, stuff that your great-granddad did, and some things that we don't sometimes use a common sense to accomplish anymore, and relieve that pressure off of that levee, so there'll be a natural relief flow for that water. But it's the coordination of something like that is phenomenal.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about. Let's kind of transition here to what happened down in Little Rock, these last couple of months. First of all, I just want to give you the opportunity. You can take as long or be as brief as you want, but what was your overall impression of the session 2017?
I feel like, there's been a lot of discussion over the tax increases and things, and there was a $50 million tax reduction, for those under $20,000 income. Also, I think the total in increases that were passed through was somewhere between 13 and 17 million. So, and in the last session there was $100 million worth of tax cuts. So I think we've been effective in the tax relief. I think we've got a long ways to go. I think the more we can take the income tax, get it as close to zero as we can get it, and move to a consumption-based system, I think that's a better way. I think hopefully that's what will come out of the reform task force is a way to transition from an income tax system to a consumption-based system. The session, I mean, I can tell you a few of my own bills that I got through, and one of them is drug screening and testing was made permanent. That we did a temporary one in the last session, the 90th, and then this session I did pass it. It's Act 314, which makes that TANF drug screening and testing permanent. And also,
and tell everybody what TANF is real quick.
It's a temporary assistance for needy families. It is a relief system, but it is a workforce system where those folks, it's help for folks who are trying to get into the workforce, and that drug screening is parallel with what will be needed in the workforce. So it's complementary to their mission. So that's what it does, and they wanted the ability to do more panels. So in the new legislation that was permanent, it gives the flexibility to workforce services to change their panel to whatever matches the workforce. So I think they're wanting to go up to a 10-panel drug test if it's needed, and so that's complementary what happens in the workforce. But there was also Act 125, which is a criminal eviction. I was the lead sponsor on, and that's the Supreme Court had ruled unconstitutional because they changed the language a few sessions ago, and this put the language back to the original language where you can, if you have a renter and you can criminally evict them, and that doesn't go through the civil process. The civil process is where a person would get liens put against them, and This is just removing them from the property. So
Yeah.
you can get law enforcement
I'm
to
gonna-
help you, and
Yeah,
that was much needed.
I'm going to look into those. I mean, because especially Act 314, and I remember when you did that last time, the drug screening and testing for TANF, and making that more permanent. I think that's something a lot of people can agree with. Because if you're, you're going to take benefits and stuff like that, you should, not be, using mind-altering drugs that make it harder for you to employ, and make it more likely you're going to stay on government assistance. I think a lot of people can get behind that idea. I do want to go back and talk about some of the things that you said while you were giving your impression of the session about the tax increases. You mentioned, there's been some talk about it, and you cited the $50 million reduction in income tax that goes into effect partly next year. And that was for people making $21,000 or less. And I've talked to people and they say, hey, that's great. I mean, how are we going to oppose a tax decrease? Yeah, and I didn't oppose it. I wish it had been more aggressive. My question to you is, though, as a Republican, and what's in the Republican Party platform, we're talking with Senator Blake Johnson, why so much quest for revenue? And what I mean by that is, there was a tire tax increase that passed, a new tire tax that passed to the tune of $1.5 million. Digital products were increased, increases on soda and candy. Now, these were offsets. Some of those, not the tire tax, some of those were offsets for the veterans. But then we had to vote back or vote down as conservatives $150 million in more revenue that the government was trying to get from internet sales tax. And then there was the gas tax, and I know everyone wants roads, but that was another $217 million that they attempted to get, a total of $380 million in proposed or passed taxes. That makes limited government conservatives that want to keep their money a little nervous. What are your thoughts on that, Senator Johnson?
They didn't make it through, so there was a total of about $17 million that made it through. It don't matter what's proposed. There's a lot of stuff proposed. 2,000 bills were proposed. Some of them were for revenue and some of them were for law changes. But the ones that matter are the ones that passes through the system. It's a complex system. There's a lot of physically conservative that voted against those measures, and they didn't make it through. The tire deal, I had a problem. I think that should have been left to the local, the landfills and those folks to adjust their revenue as needed, because all they can do is the expenditures. Right now, even before this thing was done, your local tire dealer was collecting $5 every time you bought a tire. I think this brought it to $4 whenever it's a rim. It's considered a rim charge.
It could be like $16 a car, though, right? Because they increased whichever one was the one where you put them on or take them off. That was already existing, and then they added, if you put it on or take it off. And I can't remember off the top of my head which one is which, but it's a lot of money. I was talking to some tire folks when I got tires a couple weeks ago, and they were very much aware of what had happened, very much aware, that this is kind of the beginning of trying to track these things from cradle to grave. Let me ask you this, because we're running out of time, Senator Blake Johnson. So I'm glad that a lot of those big revenue proposals didn't pass. I am glad about that. It bothers me that we have such big Republican majorities, and yet it's being proposed and even supported by the leadership. That's very troublesome to me. And so I wonder, I wonder what you think about that aspect of things, that we're controlled by so many Republicans, and yet, some of these things barely failed.
The leadership is just, each one of those folks are just one vote. So they're no different than any other legislator. They just hold a title. The swaying of the vote, whenever it comes to those fundamental matters, it's not going to sway us to $300 million worth of tax increases. That's just not going to happen, with that many conservatives. On
do you think
in our legislature?
Do you think the fact that last question, we had $380 million in proposed tax increases and passed on the table, and then we have the governor cutting the budget $70 million and then cutting it $43 million. do you think that was kind of as a response to the fact that, hey, we're not getting revenue, we're not going to get any more revenue, so we need to we now have to trim it back?
That's what's required by the way we do business with our balanced budget, and it's his job to keep us within that balance. So, you know, I mean, and those tax cuts, that $100 million and that $50 million came from him, and that's another reason for that task force is the legislature can have more of a voice in the process, and I think even though there's a lot of banter about it, I think that it will give the legislature a voice in the process for policy setting on our taxes.
Yeah, well, and I wish it had been all 135 of you guys, because that's y'all's real voice, is once every 2 years when you're in session. But I really appreciate you being on, Senator Blake Johnson,
right.
And I appreciate the work you're doing for your constituents there. I know with all that flooding there, I mean it's devastating for a lot of families, and we're going to look up these Red Cross donation points, and I want to get it out to everybody. Okay.
I've got to tell you one more.
Yes, sir.
About it's a tax procedure, and it was Act 881. And anytime they send out a notice of assessment, they have to give you the facts and evidence as part of that legislation that I passed. So it's right the way it was written. It was all they had to send you was a basis, and it was like an Easter egg hunt. Now they have to provide the facts and evidence of what they're claiming. So
they could just these local places that just hike up your property value from one year to the next. It doesn't make any sense. That's what that's trying to prevent, right?
Any kind of tax assessment, whether it be like if you're a retailer and they say you haven't paid all your sales tax, in or usury taxes or anything like that, and they send you a notice, they have to have their facts and evidence to present to you, so you can defend yourself.
That's Act 881, ladies and gentlemen. Senator Blake Johnson, we appreciate you being on the program, sir. Stay dry.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. The Liberty Machine rolls on. We'll be back in just a moment.